Lewis is one of the most remarkable speakers you will ever hear, and he's in demand as a speaker. Thank you for being here, Lewis.
Thank you.
So, what do you see as the reason human beings are scurrying around and are miserable right now and not achieving what they want? I know you've written 8 books. You've got the School of Natural Healing. You've got Real You Guru. But why are people suffering? From which hat are you going to speak?
There are many, many answers to that question, obviously. So I'd rather start at the most basic level, and that is most people want freedom, they want love, they want abundance, and they haven't been given the emotional tools within which to achieve that. And that's not our individual fault. There was a time, probably 50 to 60 years ago, where people had to go through rites of passage, an initiation, if you will, that society would actually give them, so that you would have to become a real man or a woman. And whatever the limitations of society were at that time, the idea of a formalized initiation into adulthood was a very powerful concept. That has diminished. People go to confirmations because their families send them there. They get bar mitzvah so they can get a rock band that they can listen to. So as Joseph Campbell talks about, the metaphor of the initiation is still there. But it's what music is to Beethoven is what most rites of passage are to true initiations. And that's why people got involved in human potential seminars and workshops. They attempt to do it through therapy, but it's not an intellectual process or even an emotional process. It goes much deeper. It goes in the genes because people are hardwired to have community. And social networking, for instance, is an expression of that. And sometimes in an effective way, sometimes ineffective, but it is an expression of that. We're social animals, we need to connect. And if you don't have the social intelligence to connect effectively, what you're going to essentially do is suffer. Because you're going to be trying to create rapport, you're going to try, and I'm using the word try very carefully, it's a word I tend to avoid using, trying meaning to do something unsuccessfully. That's what trying means to me. People try to fit in hierarchies and competitively in places they're not skilled emotionally or intellectually or socially to deal with. So you're guaranteed to suffer. And part of that is the addiction to short-term gratification.
The addiction to short-term gratification. Now, are you coming from that place that the Taliban comes from, that we should deny ourselves pleasures and be living a stoic life? Is that what you mean?
You can't. Lao Tzu, the Chinese philosopher, talks about that you can't impose morality on people. So it's one thing for someone to recognize what their fundamental needs are, and Maslow covers, Abraham Maslow, the psychologist, covers that. To understand who you are on a fundamental level in terms of your essential needs, and then up that ante when you've achieved that, so your social, emotional, and spiritual needs, is a transformational process. What the Taliban does is they do what Lao Tzu and Shang Tzu, the great Taoist masters, abhorred, which is imposing morality. And Taliban, that's in Islamic, but in Christian and Judaic social groups, there's the imposition of morality. And when you force morality on other people, what they do is they become repressed, or they strike out and become an attack on the body politic, for lack of a better term. They actually become a thorn in the side of that, and they create dysfunction. So you actually, the thought that I just wrote about recently is this: in order to function effectively in an insane world, a visionary has to act insane in order to appear normal.
That describes you, Lewis.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And so I think that's what really goes on.
Say it again so that we get it.
In order for, I'm going to say it differently so I don't do it by rote, but in order for an extraordinary person to function in the world, they have to act insane in order to appear normal to everybody else. Well, my other famous saying is, the difference between a shaman and a schizophrenic is shamans don't talk back to their voices in public.
So how do you work with someone who comes to you for help?
Well, I have a coaching model, which is they have to call me every day, and if they don't, I call them. So the idea of that 1 hour coaching model, it's a psychotherapy-based model, I don't really have an interest in that. I have a list of 17 key things. I call them resources. A couple are time and space and information and influence. I believe that if you can master these 17 things in your life, they're pretty basic, by the way, they're not very sophisticated, then you could pretty much master all the basic aspects of what happiness is in the world. And so people call me and they tell me the 3 that are natural for them and the 3 that are the most difficult for them. And then we go right to the core, to the belly of the beast. And one of the things that I will do a lot is someone will say something, I'll say, you just made that up. So we have realities that we just sort of make up, and we get ordinary people to agree with that reality so we can all be ordinary together and suffer and struggle together. So when someone tells me part of what the reality is, I will just say, you just made that up. And they'll say, no, I didn't. Yes, you did. No, you didn't. Yes, you did. Well, my rabbi made it up. My priest made it up. My mother made it up. So when you get to the core of it, there's an old Zen Buddhist thing about chopping wood and carrying water. If you can't do what needs to get done, you can't do anything. And most people can't do anything because they don't know what they need. They think their wants and their needs are the same. But they're not. A want is a feeling that you have that's going to give you satisfaction. And a need is something that you need to survive, emotionally, spiritually, and physically. So once a person begins a personal inquiry into what do I need, what do I want, the whole game changes.
How did you get to this understanding? What's the anatomy of your thought process?
I always made sure I went to a lot of parties that I was the dumbest person in the room. And that is the rule. Most people want to look smart. So that's the thing. People who haven't been through initiations want to look smart. So they want to be the smartest person in the room. So people think they're smart. If I'm the smartest person in the room, I run for the door. I want to be in a room of a whole bunch of people a whole lot smarter than me. And then what happens, I'm able to integrate that information and apply it to things that I know already, and it becomes a layer. It's like a puzzle.
What's your wish for humanity? What is it that you would like to put into place to make this planet a little better?
I think that it's important for people to have a vision that's not defined by form. I'm not going to make that complex. I want to simplify it. And I'll tell you a very short story and it will make sense to you. There was two people, they grew up together and had the same vision, not goal, vision. They both want to feel the ocean breeze against their face and feel the water spraying across them. And they meet about 40 years later, and one of them is incredibly happy and the other one is incredibly miserable. And the miserable guy has a sailor hat and a sailor suit and has this huge sailboat. And the old saying is the 2 best days in the sailor's life are the day they bought their boat and the day that they sell their boat. And he said, I got the dream, but it wasn't what I thought it was going to be. What about you? I said, I got the same dream. He said, what'd you do? And he pulls out a spray bottle. You know the ones that have the batteries in them with a little fan on it? And he had went to the beach and filled it with seawater. And then on a really windy day, stood on the beach and sprayed this thing in his face so he can feel the breeze and seawater. So if you define your vision by a goal, and you don't have that distinction, it's again want and need, same distinction. If you define the kind of person you want to marry, rather than you want to have an intimate, caring, loving relationship. If you're talking about you want to be wealthy as opposed to having economic freedom to do the things that are of value to you, then you will absolutely suffer. Because there's a thing called Black Swan theory. Some people know this. There's a book called Black Swan by Taibbi. And he just talks about things are going to happen that you cannot control. Guaranteed 100%. And if you have a goal with a very structured form to it, what's going to happen is you're going to have to shuffle around to try and adjust that form to the circumstances that you can't control. But if your vision is clearly defined without any form at all, then the law of attraction happens. And I'm going to give a short exercise to the room, people who are watching, listening, that they can do easily. Close your eyes and you pick a color, any color. And if you open your eyes, you will see that color in front of you. And that's what the exercise is. If you can visualize something without being attached to the form it comes in, then it will show up and be there spontaneously. You haven't lost your keys. They're just where you're not looking. Thank you.